A wave of violence has gripped the Democratic Republic of Congo, where health officials are struggling to contain an Ebola outbreak. More than 1,400 people have died from the virus. But on top of this health crisis, violent attacks between ethnic groups have killed at least 160 people. CBS News foreign correspondent Debora Patta recently traveled to the Congo. She's giving us a rare look at what it's like to cover an Ebola crisis as violence, poverty, and fear grip the country.
North Kivu is the most volatile region in the Democratic Republic of Congo, an active war zone where the latest Ebola outbreak is centered. Moving around parts of the country can be so hazardous that we need to travel with an armed escort. Danger is everywhere, behind the barrel of a militiaman's gun or lurking in a deadly virus.
It's quite steep, huh?
Yes. In the Virunga forest, where we are filming bats, which is the source for Ebola, the breathtaking natural beauty belies something far more sinister. The armed guard you see behind me is not to protect us from any dangerous animals. The real danger in this forest comes from humans. So in order to cover this story, we travel with a CBS News high-risk advisor, Jeff Mabberley.
Our hygiene and
Jeff gives us regular briefings on safety in a war zone and on how to mitigate the risk of contracting Ebola. Here, the thermometer is our most important weapon.
Perfect. So the reading there is 98.8.
Twice daily monitoring is essential. A spike in temperature, an early warning sign that something could be wrong.
99.
The setting is Lake Kivu, more like paradise than a prelude to terror. Basic hygiene saves lives here. We hose down everything from ourselves to the equipment with chlorine spray, which kills the Ebola virus. The protective white suits, goggles and masks act as a barrier against the possible transmission of the disease. Our cameraman, Mishak Dube, is no stranger to conflict, but filming Ebola in a war zone is a first.
You know, you go to war zones, you can see somebody shooting at you. Covering Ebola is something that you can't see. We've got head wraps, body wraps for the GoPros, and yeah, it's actually quite a lot of equipment, and if any of it gets contaminated, we'll have to throw away.
The next day we head to the epicenter of the disease in Beni. First stop, the Ebola Treatment Center, where we're not required to wear protective gear. There have been major advances in the treatment of Ebola since the last deadly outbreak in 2014. Now patients are put in these plastic cubes, which provides a protective barrier between the doctor and the patient, and that helps dramatically in preventing the spread of the disease. But there are still times when health workers have to care for a patient face to face. This is too hazardous for Mishak to film, so Dr. Juneri Kormo agrees to wear a GoPro, which will have to be soaked in a bucket of chlorine to decontaminate it.
Okay, cool.
Entering the Ebola hot zone, we get a rare look inside an isolation cube. Carefully, he checks his patient, every point of contact deadly. But Ebola is not the only enemy here. 20 years of conflict has left a community weary of war and far too accustomed to loss. 9 people were killed in this village by an armed militia group. We suit up in body armor and helmets to accompany the UN peacekeepers deployed in this region to protect villagers. There are over 30 armed militia groups operating in this area. One of them is the ADF, a Ugandan-based Islamist organization that is causing havoc in this area. Numerous deaths, frequent attacks, and now they're going for Ebola treatment centers. The soldiers can't only secure the area from behind the safety of an armored vehicle. Foot patrols are essential. You can see how thick and dense the jungle is here. This is where the militia hide out, making it very difficult to track them. There are so many ways to die here, which is why health workers are more terrified of the violence than Ebola. Next, we swap our body armor for our Ebola armor when we visit this children's unit. There are no isolation cubes here, so we have to wear full protective gear. The women holding the children are Ebola survivors who are now immune to the disease. But even with our protective gear, we have to stand far away during the interview to avoid any potential hazardous contact. With the interview over, the decontamination starts. Taking off the suit is the most dangerous time. You have to be meticulously careful not to touch it, as it could be contaminated.
Taking your mask off so you can breathe in it, okay?
That's better.
Unlike the people who live here, we get to leave and go back to our children free from the burden of war and disease. But this time, the relief after finishing a dangerous assignment is muted. We will have to monitor our temperatures for 21 days. In a war zone, the danger recedes as you leave the area. But here, it is invisible and could be inside you. Debora Patta, CBS News, Beni, Democratic Republic of Congo.